Hello and welcome to the Anthony James YouTube channel. I'm going to be going over some Dark questions today. First time in a while. You know me, I still can't get the show out of my head. I'm trying my hardest. Well, I'm not really trying very hard to be honest with you, but it's in there and it will not leave. I did release a video called 25 Unanswered Questions. It did very, very well. I was very pleased with it. 114,000 views as of now, over 1,000 comments. A lot of those comments were extra questions that people wanted to know. So I don't claim to be the all-knowing power of Dark. I've got plenty wrong already in my YouTube career. However, I do like to think that I can come up with pretty convincing ideas as to why something didn't have to be solved in the show, or maybe just some reason why we can feel happy with the way that the show ended, even though there was some questions which you had to answer yourself. Now, you know me, I think Dark is a pretty close to perfect show. So I'm happy enough to go through these questions without any real fear that I won't be able to come up with some nonsense as to why it's okay. If you manage to ask me a question which really does dumbfound me and I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you that. Because I know that this show isn't perfect and there probably is someone out there who's asking questions which really don't have an answer. Let me go back to the season 1, episode 7, School on a Sunday mistake. It's not a perfect show, but it's pretty close to perfect in my opinion. So I'm going to try and answer all the questions. There's a fair bit of them, so I think we'll just get into it. What do you think? Well, before we do, can you make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel? I release a video every Thursday. It's usually a review or a news show, or even just a video essay about something that a film or TV show that I want to talk about. Every Monday, my podcast comes out, and that's where I take my friend Conrad through Dark, episode by episode. Conrad has never seen Dark before, so it's absolutely hilarious all the theories he's coming up with. He's getting a fair bit right, but he's also getting a fair bit wrong. Come and join us, it's really, really good fun. Alright, so let's get going. First question is from Joshy George. They say, there was a scene where Jonas couldn't kill himself because his older self exists. The same logic should apply in the origin world as well, right? As the parallel world already exists, Jonas and Marta, characters in the parallel world, cannot impact their own existence by preventing the death of H.G. Tannhaus's son. Very interesting question. So because Adam wasn't able to die, or Jonas wasn't able to kill himself by hanging himself, he wasn't able to kill himself, surely that means that they couldn't have stopped the car and erased their own existence because Jonas can't kill himself. Unfortunately, Joshy, I think this one's actually pretty easy to explain away because the Jonas and the Marta who traveled to the origin world weren't part of the loop. So that's where it sort of gets, that's where it comes apart there. They're not part of the loop. So they can actually die. And they can die at the time they're not supposed to die, if you know what I mean. They have no predetermined future. Well, not the same predetermined future as the cycle. So the answer is, the cycle Jonas, who is the one who turns into Adam, cannot kill himself. But the Jonas who splinters off into the origin world can die. And the Jonas who splinters off into impregnate Marta, alt Marta, he can die too, and he did. All right, next one. Question. Well, there's 25 questions in the episodes. That's why I said question 26. How did little Celia get her scar that looks exactly like the one Eve has? Eve gives Marta. How did Celia get a scar that looks the same one as the Marta one? I don't know how Celia got her scar. Was she born with it? Was it a tricycle accident when she was a young child? I'm gonna take a sip of water. Sorry. I don't know, actually. We don't know the answer to that. That's one of those questions where we don't really need to know the answer either. It doesn't matter how she got the scar, she just did. Does it look a little bit like the one Eva has? Yeah, I suppose a little bit. Not exactly, but, you know, a little bit. Question from Surab. What did Adam think he was doing differently than the Adam that came before him? Good question. Since the world still exists despite the previous Adam's efforts, there must be some change that Adam must have believed he was going to make in the timeline that the previous Adam did not make. What was it? What did he think he was doing differently? Well, what he thought he was doing differently is, you have to remember, Adam never actually had a mentor or an older version of himself to look at and to know what he did. So the stranger saw what Adam was going to do, Jonas saw what the stranger did, but Adam didn't have that older person, because obviously the older Adam had died. So he never saw what that older Adam did. So the thing that he did that he thought he was doing differently was actually destroy the origin inside Marta's womb. So when he killed Alt Marta by focusing the power down on her with the hurricane or all the dark matter, he sort of focused all the energy into her, and she died in what looked like a hurricane. It completely obliterated her. That's what he thought he was doing differently. Obviously, then he stood there. He was there with his eyes closed, and then he opened them up, and nothing had changed because the Adam before him had done the exact same thing. But he didn't know that. The Adam before him had done the exact same thing. So that's what he thought he was doing differently, but he actually didn't do it differently. He thought it was different, but it wasn't. And actually, he did that because Eva sort of held information back from him. He didn't know that there was another Alt Marta pregnant with the Origin. If you want an explanation as to how there was another Marta pregnant with the Origin, go and watch my explained video. I go through all the timelines in that. But basically, Adam thought he had the upper hand on Eva, but actually Eva had the upper hand on him. Of course, Claudia had the upper hand on both of them. Next question. I've watched the show 3 times, and I can proudly say that I understand it at almost a perfect level. Okay. The only thing I keep trying to understand and not being able to is, when H.G. Tannhaus created the split 2 worlds by initiating the time machine, what was the next thing that happened? So how do the things unveil from that point? Is it little Charlotte being brought to Tannhaus by the older Charlotte and older Elizabeth, thus setting the motion for the whole storyline? Or is it another bootstrap paradox, which we can't know for sure what happened next? Right. I think I understand your question to be, what happened in the 2 alternate realities whenever the Origin world was destroyed and created them? Well, basically, past, present, and future were all created at the same time. So it wasn't like there was something that happened first. Everything that happened in the timelines was just created. It's everything was created at the same time. So it's not like Elizabeth was born first and then gave birth to Charlotte, and that started the bootstrap paradox. No, it was always existing. Whenever the 2 worlds were created, the bootstrap paradox was created in at the same time. Okay? Next question. Why did Claudia have to send Jonas and Marta to save Tannhaus' son? Why couldn't she do it herself? Good question. I'm not really sure if there's a legitimate rules answer for this. It might just be maybe Claudia realized that there had to be one person who was from, like, they both of them were from each of the timelines. Maybe it had to be people who didn't exist in the Origin world, you know? So Claudia couldn't have went herself because she existed in the Origin world, and that maybe would have messed up the timeline there and would have been a paradox, and it couldn't happen. So maybe it had to be those 2. Now, we know that there's some analysis been done on the meanings of the names. So Marek is apparently a male version of Marta, or maybe they mean the same thing. I can't remember off the top of my head, sorry. But Marek and Marta, Marek being H.G. Tannhaus' son, Marek and Marta mean the same thing, I believe. And then Sonia, who is Tannhaus' daughter-in-law, Sonia is actually an anagram of Jonas. So that doesn't tell us why they had to go, but it does show that the creators were putting a little bit of more imagery in there for us. But yeah, I think they had to go because 1, they didn't exist in the Origin world, and 2, maybe there needed to be one from each alternate world to travel into the Origin world. That's the best I can do. All right, next. How in the alt world does Jonas take Marta through the cave and they land in the future? Oh, okay. So in the alternate world, when they go through the cave, they're able to get into the post-apocalyptic desert-like future. But the cave in the prime world, or the first world we see, Adam's world, is 86, 53, and 2019. So how does the cave take you into the future? Well, again, this one doesn't really need an answer. The show showed us that it did take you into the future. There was lots of things that happened in the alternate world that were different, that were very similar but different. That could just be something that we put down to that. It was different, but it was also very similar. So maybe just the years were slightly off. Because we know how the Stranger created that wormhole. He created that 3 lines by turning on the machine in episode 10 of season 1. So when he did, maybe the person who created the wormhole on the other side did it in 2019, which made that the center of the trifecta. Okay, so maybe it was the fact that they just did it at a different time, which created the 3 time zones out from that point rather than back in 86. Or maybe it's something like, because the apple could travel anywhere it wanted, maybe whenever the apple created the wormhole in the cave in the alternate world, it created it so you could actually go 33 years. And maybe there was more than 3 paths. I can't remember if we actually saw if there wasn't or not, but I'm not sure. My guess would be that they just created it at a different time. That's how I would imagine it. All right, Vic. I love this. Thank you very much. Haven't found the answer to one question I was thinking. That's great. Why doesn't the child of Marta and Jonas have a name? I'm sure they do. I'm sure they've got a name. They just didn't tell us. It's obviously the fact that they didn't tell us their name. Well, I know he said he was never given a name. I'm sure there's something that they refer to them as, like Eva and Marta and middle-aged Marta. I'm sure that they're not calling them the unknown. They might just call him son. I don't know. I would imagine the reason that he doesn't have a name, and again, it's the same answer as I'm going to give 100 times in this video probably. The reason he doesn't have a name is because whenever Marta, like the reality, like the whole alternate reality and the whole prime reality were created at the one time. So there already was the 3 of them existing. So whenever the young Marta has the baby, well, there's already 2 older versions, or even 3 older versions that are already there, and they don't have a name. And they didn't have a name ever. So because it repeats infinite times, if someone didn't have a name at the start, they're not going to have a name at the end. So you can't just automatically give them a name out of nowhere. So it's a really maybe unsatisfying way to explain it, but that's just the way it is. I'd imagine they don't have a name because they didn't need one. I don't think that the unknown went to school. I don't think that the unknown socialized with anyone. I think the unknown just talked to Marta. And I think that she called him son, maybe. I don't know what she called him. But yeah, I agree with you. It's weird that he doesn't have a name. It is weird. I agree with you. Right, like when Marta is scarred by Eva, she tells her that she has to kill Jonas and all that because otherwise their child won't be born, and then presents said child to her, and the little one hugs her, but never gives the child a name. Yeah. True. How does he grow up and he's literally traveling all his life in 3 different ages, through timelines and killing people, also commanded by Eva, which, man, sounds like a hell of a mother. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. It does sound pretty crazy to ordering your son to go and kill people. Yeah, I agree with that. What I mean is Marta is a really good. Is Marta really a good person at all? Well, Alt Marta. We've seen who she becomes. She becomes Eva. I wouldn't really necessarily call Eva a good person. Would you? I wouldn't really call her a good person. So, no, she doesn't become a good person. If the loop is supposed to continue so that the child can live, but she never gave him a name, and then sends him out to kill people his whole life. Yeah. Yes. I think. Yes. Yes. Next one. What was the purpose of Noah's chair at the end of the day? Well, the purpose of the chair, as far as I understand it and the way I explain it to myself, the purpose of the chair was to enable Noah to be able to send Helga back. So Helga had to be sent back after the tunnel was closed. So when the stranger at the end of season 1 turned the machine on in the tunnel, as far as I'm aware, maybe I'm wrong, let me know if I'm wrong, when he turned it on, it actually created the wormhole, except it also stopped the wormhole from being open past that point. He created the wormhole to be open before, in that period before. But when Helga actually touches Jonas's finger and travels through to 86, there's no longer a wormhole to go back with. Helga has no way to go back. I think that Noah does. I think that Noah is able to go back, because you know how he has the time machine that he gives to Bartos. So Noah does. However, he does send Helga back with the machine. I know that. So obviously, there's also the argument that maybe that machine had to be made in order to eventually create the time machine as we know it. I'm not sure about that because the time machine itself is a bootstrap paradox, so there was never a point where it wasn't made. So I'm not quite sure. It might literally be that Jonas or Adam wanted to know more about time travel, so he ordered Noah to create the time machine. He ordered Noah to create his own time machine so that they could all understand more about time. I think that's probably pretty close. I would also say that Adam knows, well, as he was Jonas, he knows all these children are supposed to go missing. They're all supposed to go missing. So because they're all supposed to go missing, Adam actually makes sure that they do. That's, it's one of those things like he has to make sure that the loop happens the exact same way every time so that when he gets to the end, he can end it the way he thinks, like by destroying Marta. Obviously that's wrong, but he thinks that's what he's going to do. So yeah. Alright, next question from Nilesh. Marta's son wrote the book on which there was a symbol of the three worlds connected, yet the triquetra. Yeah, the triquetra you call it. The question is, how did Eva know about the other two worlds? How did she know? Well, she only knew about one other world. She knew about her own world, obviously, and she knew about the prime world. She didn't know about the origin world. Only Claudia found out about that. So how did Eva know about the prime world? Well, she was brought into it by Jonas. Like the way it happened, it always happened. So whenever her older self brought Jonas back into her world, into the alternate world, and then in episode 1 of she actually took him at the end of season 2, and then episode 1 of season 3, Jonas went and found her. Now she had never had anything. Marta had never had anything to do with time travel at that point. So Jonas went and found her, and then that's what started her in this whole sort of life of time travel and learning about it, and then eventually becoming Eva in one of her timelines. So the answer to how does she know? Well, the way she knows is actually a huge paradox. So there's not really an answer to that, except for the fact that she knows it because she was supposed to know it, and she always did know it. Again, it's one of those things that if you're not someone who can accept that as an answer, well then, that's fair enough, but I just don't think you're going to be as satisfied with the ending as people who were able to just to accept the fact that when Origin HD Townhouse turned on his machine and it created these two other worlds, all of this stuff was put into place, like sort of like the cards were shuffled, and then they were shuffled, they couldn't move until obviously they did move. So it's just one of those again. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of them, as I said. Next question from Jay, 007, James Bond. Why did Jonas have an hallucination of Michael? Oh yes, so in the first season, and then also he says here, why does Marta have the same? Is there an explanation for that? My explanation for that would be, now, what I believe is, I believe that the creators might have had something else in planned for that. I think that, I know that the creators, excuse me, I'm going to have a drink of water. I know that the creators had a plan for seasons 2 and 3, which they somewhat abandoned. Not completely abandoned, but they somewhat abandoned it and wrote it again. You can hear that in a interview with Berlinale. I think it was 2018 they did it, when they were talking about season 1, and they said that they had scrapped what they wanted to do for season 2 and 3. Now, I do believe that some of the stuff stayed in, but I think that there's probably a lot of stuff in season 1 that they did originally intend to be true. Like maybe everyone thought coming out of season 1 that Agnes was Noah's wife. So Noah was actually the abusive ex-husband. A lot of people thought that was the case. Maybe they originally planned that. So maybe they did originally plan that, but then they changed it. Who knows? I believe that the oil-covered Michael in the first episode, and in the end with Jonas, Stranger Jonas is still seeing him in the last episode of season 1 in the tunnel. So that's how they sort of show that is Jonas, actually. I believe that they had a different plan for that. And the reason why I say that they had a different plan for that was, is because Michael Kahnwald actually, if you look at his paintings, they are very, very inspired by like the Black Matter. Now, that sort of point, maybe that's just them trying to put images in our minds, so when it gets there, we aren't surprised, and it's an allusion to it, and it is all just very connected. But I think there was originally plans for Mikkel, who turns into Michael Kahnwald, to in some way be trying to discover what happened to him and going down a rabbit hole. I think there was originally plans. That's my own feeling. So why did he appear to him? We don't actually know the real reason. But now that in my opinion has been changed and we got what we got, that's the storyline we got. I put it down to there's a lot of religious themes in the show, and in a lot of religious text there are visions and apparitions, and people appear like sort of a saint or an angel appears to someone. More an angel, not a saint, but they appear to someone, and then that sends them on their journey through faith. Okay, so they have a vision, and that's what I think that at the end of the day, that's what the oil covered people was to signify. It was sort of a vision to send Jonas and Marta on their paths. That's what I take from it. Is there any extra reason for them? No. Could there have been? Yeah, there could have been. But I think they changed it. That's what I believe. Okay, next question. Why didn't Adam know about taking the different direction before the apocalypse? So I think why didn't Adam know about splitting the timelines? Because he didn't know. Same reason I don't know how to speak German. He didn't know. If Marta's... that's really harsh, but that's all I'm going to say. He just didn't know. I don't know how to explain how someone doesn't know something. If Marta's pregnant is written in the last pages of the leather book, and he didn't know he was the father of the unknown, it's fine. But if he knows he's the father of the unknown, then he should have been known about running into two different directions before. Oh yeah. So actually, he did know eventually. Like, he didn't know originally, but when he got the last pages of the book, he did know. He did. Of course he knew. That's why he was destroying Alt Marta. If he didn't know that there was two directions and there was an Alt Marta in a different world by that point, well then what's he destroying? So clearly he knew. He did figure it out eventually because he was destroying the origin baby inside of Marta, Alt Marta. So he did know, but he just didn't know originally. He figured it out with the last pages of the book. Also, he knows already about two different scenarios happened in the Kahnwald house since 1888. Marta, so he had an idea from that point that there was two worlds. Obviously, it took him a lot longer until he got the actual pages. Look, seems like you're answering your own question here. Maybe you are. maybe I'm misinterpreting this comment, and you're actually answering your own question here. But yeah, so Stranger Jonas knew that there was two different worlds from that point, or two different timelines anyway. And then he eventually was able to, when he turned into Adam and got the last pages, eventually figure out how to destroy the loop. He thought he was destroying it by destroying Alt Marta. He wasn't, but that's what he thought. Why did he have no idea about this until Claudia explains? Again, he just didn't have any idea. He did know. He knew about the two worlds. He didn't know about the three. How did the dog open the door? This is really funny because in the podcast with Conrad at the minute, we're talking about the dog because the dog. We're up to the episode where the dog comes through time, and he asked the exact same thing to me. So I'm ready to accept that he randomly found his way. Well, it's a girl, Gretchen. She randomly found her way into the cave, but a dog can't open a door. You're right, a dog can't open a door. So it's really good that the show showed us that old Claudia did it. Isn't it? It's really great of the show to show us that. Now, you've obviously missed that. It's a complicated show. You have to be paying attention all the time. You might miss something. But yeah, the show actually showed us that. They showed us that old Claudia actually took the dog through in order to set her middle self, on the path of discovering all this time travel stuff. So yeah, we already knew that. Okay, next one. Last drink of water. I'm ready. Who was that in the cave when the sound scared the teenagers off in 101 and 301? 101 is easy, I think. 301 not so much. 101 the person who was in the cave was actually Jonas. Because if you remember, what the person's talking about is whenever the teenagers in the first episode go out to get the drugs from Eric's chair, there's a huge noise from the cave as if someone's using the door. And yeah, that was Jonas. So remember whenever old Claudia comes in season 2, episode 6, to take Jonas away from his dad who goes to kill himself then. He takes Jonas away. She takes Jonas away and then sort of trains him up for a year or whatever. And he's actually the one who goes and takes Mikkel through the cave. So that is actually Jonas traveling into 2019, who's like a year older at this point, taking Mikkel back through. So it was Jonas that time. In in season 3, episode 1, who could it have been? My mind goes to... There's no real... maybe there's an answer for this, and this is a great one, actually, one I'd love to know the answer for. My mind's going to Altmarta, just because in the Prime world it was Jonas. In the alt world, it might be Altmarta. I'm not fully sure. I'd have to rewatch that. To be honest with you, I've only watched season 3 twice. So, I've watched the whole thing in a row twice. I've watched different episodes a number of times for various reasons. But I would need to watch that episode or that season again just to have that question in mind. You know what I mean? Just to make sure. But okay. Would have the ending been more epic if we found out that Marta and Jonas were the ones to cause the car accident in the first place? That's what I thought was going to happen. And I'm sure a load of you are with me on that. I really, really thought that Jonas and Marta were going to arrive in the origin world and the car was going to go off the road. That's what I thought was going to happen. And I'm sure most of us did at that moment. The fact that it didn't happen, like the whole time, we had to have something. Like the whole time, yeah, I really enjoyed the ride of the loop. And like knowing that it all happened again and it's going to keep happening, I did enjoy that. I really enjoyed that. The whole way through the show, I enjoyed it. Having said that, looking back on it now, having finished the show, the fact that they did break the loop and the fact that they do no longer exist and the story came to a conclusion, it made the show so much better. So much better that you can go back to season 1 now. You can go back to episode 1, season 1, episode 2, and you know that it's all for a reason. I don't think the show would have had the same rewatch potential or the same depth if they showed up there, the car crashed, and they caused it, and it was all a big loop. I think they needed that sort of breaking of the loop in order to have the show be satisfying and in order to make it all actually mean something. That's my own thing. You say you guess it would have been too predictable. I would agree because I think we all thought that was going to happen. And the fact that it didn't, it's sort of like they double bluffed us. We were expecting the whole time for it to be broken, but then Adam didn't break the loop, and then we were like, oh, what? Okay, so it is gonna keep going, and then all of a sudden we get the origin world, and we're like, oh my god, it's gonna be broken, and then we're like, oh no, hang on, they're gonna cause the car crash, and then all of a sudden, yes, they did break it. So it really was a roller coaster, and it would have been too predictable. I agree. How did the apocalypse or God particle kill everyone again? It destroyed the whole world, right? Yeah, that's what an apocalypse is. An apocalypse, I'm pretty sure. There's been discussions about this in Reddit and stuff about whether or not it did actually destroy the whole world. And some people are saying, no. It only destroyed that area. That doesn't make any sense to me because why would anyone stay? It's like, imagine like just Germany exploded. Why is Elizabeth still living there? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's an apocalypse. An apocalypse destroys the world. That's what the word apocalypse means. It did destroy the world. The bunker seemed pretty hiding place to be safe from it. Well, you say that, but the show showed us the bunker works. I think if you imagine like the shockwave going out, the way that the show had made it, it doesn't have to be that realistic, this part, as long as they're consistent with it. So the shockwave goes out. It seemed like as long as you're underground, the shockwave won't hit you. Like if you're underground and then the shockwave goes across you, it won't hit you. That's because we know that one of the Jonas timelines, he went into the basement, so obviously that was safe as well. As long as you're underground. Why did Jonas and Adam's skin become deformed from excess time travel, yet it didn't affect anyone else, e.g. Claudia, Eva? Maybe they used moisturizer? Well, I'm sure they did use moisturizer, but that's against the point. We actually saw Jonas getting zapped when he was creating the God particle machine in the late 1800s. We saw him getting zapped by the machine, by electricity. I would imagine that just happened a lot as he was creating the machine, and eventually he was just covered in scars. Simple explanation, but that's it. So he got the scars because of time travel, because he was trying to create time travel, but he didn't get them from actually traveling through time. You understand? So it was sort of a red herring there. We all expected him to get them from traveling through time, but actually he just got it as a result of creating time travel. So, does anyone know how Tronta survived the apocalypse? Yeah, I think this one is another one where we sort of just have to trust ourselves, but it is pretty simple to come up with an answer. What did Claudia have? She had the gold orb. She wanted Tronta to kill Regina for her. I also imagine that she wanted to save Tronta. So I think in my mind it's simple. Claudia saved him. You know, she went back with the gold orb. We just didn't see it. And she saved him before the apocalypse happened. That's as best as I can do. Next one. I don't understand. Hannah, who had a fling with young Egon in the 50s, is the one from the main dimension. So Egon in the alt universe also gets with Hannah alt universe to create another Cilia. Yes. And this is something that passed a lot of people by because it was very fleeting, this. But basically, I think it was episode 6 of the last season, Eva's in a montage at the end, or maybe it was episode 7. It might have been episode 7, I think. Eva was giving orders. Eva was giving orders to all of her sort of minions, the minions of Eva, and old Egon was one of them. And when she said to old Egon, she said to him, "Go and make your past happen, or make sure your past happens." So by saying that, what she actually meant was, go and take Hannah and take her back in time to meet you as a younger man. So go and get Hannah, take her back in time to meet you as a younger man, and then like the whole affair can happen and everything like it did in the Prime world. So in the Prime world, Hannah went back by herself because she wanted to, get one over on Ulrich. Obviously, she wasn't going to go back in time for that because she was with Ulrich in the present time. So in the alternate world, she went back because old Egon saved her from the apocalypse. Just to add on here, during that, when old Egon goes and gets her, she's covered in blood. Now that is actually not her in labor or anything like that. That's her. It's her having a miscarriage. So Ulrich's baby Ulrich and Hannah never had a baby because it was a miscarriage, and that was happening during the apocalypse. Which, to be honest with you, when that happened, I really, really was like, oh, of course they did. Everyone everywhere was theorizing who their baby would be. And obviously in Dark, we're thinking about the families a lot. And what they just did was they just pulled the carpet out from under us and said, oh yeah, that was just a red herring. And there's a load of red herrings in the show. There needs to be for a good mystery. But I'm sure we were all like racking our brains. Who could that baby be? Is it Peter? Is it Boris Neivold? We were all thinking who could it be, but turned out to be no one because they didn't actually survive. The biggest question I had in Dark was, where were the Nazis? Well, do you know the dates of World War II? 39 to 45. I think the Nazis came to prominence in the late 20s. So we saw 1921. We saw 1953 and 54. We saw 1986 and 87. We saw 2019, 2020. We saw 2053, 2052. Where were the Nazis supposed to be? I do understand that they on purpose didn't really mention them that much. Yeah, I think they made that choice on purpose, and I can understand that. I live in Northern Ireland. I have since I was 12. To the point where I feel Northern Irish. That is, even though I have an Australian accent to a certain extent, I feel Northern Irish, and Northern Irish has a very troubled past. And for a very long time, all the media, all the film, all the TV coming out of Northern Ireland was all about the troubled past. And you know what? A lot of it still is. But I really like it when a show comes out of Northern Ireland that isn't about the troubled past. And that's what they were trying to do with this. It's not about Nazis. It's set in Germany. It doesn't have to be about Nazis. And I think the people of Germany are going to be really happy that it's not about Nazis too. All right, next one. If God Particle was already there in 1921, then why wasn't it there in 2019 or 2020? So why didn't it stay? Good question. I don't know the rules of the God Particle completely. Can you just turn off the machine? I would imagine you can. Can you? I don't know. Maybe there's some way. Maybe Adam figured out some way to sort of shut it down. That's what I would imagine. Because before he went to the future, so he was always in like the 21 era, like sort of going up to that point. Whenever he actually eventually went to the future in the third season, I'd imagine he found a way to turn it off. That's as simple as I would put it. He found a way to turn it off. Yeah. Question 20. How did Hannah know where to find Jonas and introduce Cilia? Did she know he was a time traveler and that he was there at the same time? She did know he was a time traveler. Obviously she did, because she met Stranger Jonas in season 2. How did she know where to find Jonas? Okay, so this is a really strange one. All right. I think, and I would have to go back and do a lot of analysis of the show to see if there's any proof. There might not be any proof of this. But what I think happened is I think that Hannah ended up there, not through her own machine, but I think she got there through a golden orb somehow. And I think she got there through a golden orb from one of Eva's minions whenever they were going out to make sure everything happened the way it should. So remember at the end of episode 7, Eva sent all of her minions out to make sure everything happened the way it should. I think that's how Hannah ended up there. Because otherwise, there's no explanation for it. And because there's no other explanation for it, I'm pretty sure that that's the one that's the truth. Because the 33-year machine, there's no way mathematically for Cilia to be that age and Hannah to be that age and to make it to that year. I think Cilia would have to be a lot older for them to wait a certain amount of time in order to go back. So yeah, in my opinion, they were taken there. Now, obviously, it wasn't told to us that they were, but that's sort of what had to have happened in order to make sure that it worked properly. She had to have been taken there. That's it, again. It's one of those ones where if that's not, it would have been nice to see it. I agree. It would have been nice to see it. I think if we got 10 episodes in the last season, they could have shown us all these little things that sort of were intended for us to imply, to sort of read between the lines. But it would have been nice to see it. It would have been nice to see it. Was the granddaughter of Tannhaus, Charlotte, the same Charlotte which was brought to him by old Charlotte and Elizabeth? No. No, it can't be, because the Charlotte that was brought to him by Charlotte and Elizabeth is Elizabeth's daughter, who's Charlotte's daughter, who's Elizabeth's daughter. That can't exist in the origin world. So in the origin world, he did have a granddaughter called Charlotte, and you might notice that a lot of the stuff from Tannhaus's life in the origin world is echoed in the 2 alternate worlds. And it's echoed in a way that sort of his life is sporadically spread throughout the worlds. So the reason why Time, when it created these 2 alternate worlds, called that child Charlotte was because he had a granddaughter called Charlotte. Is that the same child? Is it the same granddaughter, the same DNA? No. But it's not the same child. Except the reason why she's called Charlotte is because of these echoes from him when he turned the machine on. Because remember, baby Charlotte existed in the alternate world and the prime world as well. H.G. Tannhaus in the prime world, who we saw, his family did die in the car crash. Even though it was in the alternate worlds, they still died in the car crash, because he said he spoke about the fact that he told teenage Charlotte that the night that she was brought to him, that was the night that his family died in the car crash. So it still happened. So it couldn't be the same child. The actual baby Charlotte, I'm pretty sure that baby, they said they never found her body. I'm pretty sure that was just trying to imply that baby, I'm sure that maybe they wanted to question it, but I'm just sure, like, a baby in a lake, it's going to go missing, you know. It's just a sad case, unfortunately. All right, how many have I got to go here? Because I've got a fair bit. Right, I think I'm going to leave the next for another video. And I could do even more questions on Dark. But thank you very much for watching. Hopefully, I've answered a fair bit there. If you want to ask more questions of your own, if you want to ask even more, I can make another video. I don't mind how many of these I make. I love doing it. that would be fantastic. So leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see more TV and film analysis. I also am going to always make videos on Dark, so if you're a Dark fan and you want to subscribe for that, fantastic. I've just put a review out of it, The Expanse Season 1. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's a fantastic show, and I'm going to be putting my next review up in a while. I had mentioned in my last video, and if you didn't watch that one, I mentioned that I'm going to start doing live streams in the next few weeks. And on those live streams, I'm going to do some reviews, I'm going to do some news, but I'm also going to have some participation with the people who are watching at the time. Maybe even if there's only 10 people, I'll do some participation, sort of get us to vote on things, and sort of you'll have a say in what I cover. If there's anything in particular you want me to cover, make sure you leave a comment. Make sure you catch our podcast on Mondays. Take Conrad through Dark episode by episode. It's absolutely fantastic. Subscribe to me on Instagram, Hey Anthony James, or I think it's The Anthony James, and Hey Anthony James on Twitter, one of those. I put up some funny stuff. I put up a shot of my setup here, so have a look at that, because it is a bit makeshift, I have to be honest with you. But we're doing our best. Thank you very much for watching. See you later.